Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar from Flare Academy. My name is Tammy, and this is OBSCURA, the future of cybercrime. So this is going to be an interesting exploration, actually, of, I think, concepts and ideas of what can happen in the next 5 or so years. And again, things move so fast that some of the concepts that we go through here might happen in the next couple of years, and we have to reevaluate, or some stuff might not even take place, right? So this is really just an exploration. A little bit about myself. My name is Tammy Harper. I'm a senior threat intelligence researcher and certified dark web investigator at Flare. I'm also a cat mom. I love photography. I'm a huge astronomy nerd. I'm a huge techno head. I love listening to techno. I also love running, playing badminton, and you can always catch me on the tennis court. So that is my QR code for my LinkedIn. I swear it's okay to scan. If you aren't following me, please follow me. That is where I post a lot of my research and where you can get a hold of me if you want to talk to me. So let's get started. So when I was thinking of doing this, this presentation, I was thinking of how to separate things and how to actually talk about it. And it really comes down to a few core sections. And I think one of the sections is for example, we have to talk about the underground, and the underground has always been there and it's always evolving. Every culture, every country, everybody has an underground economy. And this is a great quote by Thomas Chandler Halliburton, who was a Nova Scotian politician back in the 1800s. And so his quote goes, "Whenever there is authority, there is a natural inclination to disobedience." And I think that is a very, very good quote. And sometimes the disobedience is not necessarily a reflection of malfeasance or maliciousness. It is because the obedience can be what you can be the negative, right? So it's not like all criminals are bad, right? And what makes crime, and crime is really about what are you doing, because it's against the law, but what is the law, right? So it is a very interesting concept, and this is what we're going to be exploring. And sometimes you have to break the law just to survive. So a lot of this happened when we were looking at the Soviet Nanevo, or also known as the left. And this happened because during the 80s, the 60s and the 80s, the government was trying to supply and centralize everything. And there was a collapse in supply chain. And essentially, when people were trying to get some food or get pieces for agricultural machines or just machinery and thing, the central government system failed, and you had to basically go to the underground or the shadow economy to make things. So this was really in the Soviet era. And when we're looking at this, people were really trying to just survive. And it was a really bad time for shortages. And this came to food, this came to medicines, this came to services, it came to really anything. And so this idea molded a generation, right? And we're looking at it a lot today with basically when we're looking at Russian-speaking cybercrime. But this is not just about the ex-Soviet states or anything like this. This is just an example that we're familiar with, but this applies to every country. This applies to everything. For example, there was the prohibition in the United States. There was the basically any country where you have laws that restrict restrict the population in an unfavorable way, there will be backlash. So basically, this is how things started off. And just to give you an idea of what it was, the culture, these are the food lines in the Soviet era. Now, it's important to say, for example, this wasn't the case in every Soviet state. Like Ukraine didn't necessarily have like food shortages this bad. And it's also important to say that this is not reflective of like the everyday, but this is a time that was actually it was a tough time to be part of these countries. So just life in this time. Imagine having to ask your friend for getting a spare part from the factory, and this is how you would basically. And everything was bot networks, right? And if you wanted extra extra drinks or extra food, this is how everything was made through favors, and everything was brokered through who you knew and how you could help them. It was a bartering system almost. And of course, we had countercultures that arose and made things really, really interesting. So it was an open secret, right, that this second economy there, and even today we have this second economy, right? In New York, for example, there's the counterfeit markets, right? There's in China, you can basically get like as parts and anything from that are basically taken from the factories there, and you can reassemble anything you want. So there was like this clear there was this once example of a researcher who went to China and basically was able to reconstruct an iPhone from parts that he bought from street vendors, right? Or you can basically just build anything you want. And this is like a shadow economy that runs, and everybody has this. I'm not saying that if you're part of this, you're malicious or you're bad. I'm just saying that this is a need for like just being a human in today's civilization, right? Every country has this. So the idea is that now that we have these black markets or these underground networks and this underground where you can get these alternative services, right? How do people leverage them? And how do people like why are certain services okay and some services are not? And then it goes into morality, it goes into ethics, it goes into understanding what we can actually take a look at and what is what do you want to get out of it, really? And a lot of these things is just like, does it cause harm, right? There's a lot of moral questions that we have to ask. So the world is changing, and I won't try to. I just don't want to get too political within this webinar, of course, but the world is changing, and there's a lot of governments right now that are going through a lot of big changes, and it's going to be a very interesting time to see, because when there's a lot of big political changes that are swift, like we're seeing a lot of governments being toppled over and kicked out in the recent weeks, in the recent months, and Nepal, for example. And so we're seeing a lot of how will that affect the online world? And what I'm looking at is how is this going to affect crime, essentially, online? And with all of these undergrounds and everything's shifting so quickly, and technology and especially artificial intelligence making things so quick, how do we adapt and how do we stay ahead of the curve? So the whole idea, and this is the whole concept of this talk, is trust, and looking at how you can build trust and how these theaters and these networks build trust. So let's do a quick pause here and let's go to the first poll. And I think this is a good time to do this. I'm just going to ask Angela to run that first poll, and I'm going to take a look at the results here. All right, the poll here. So I am seeing people clicking in here. All right. All right, I saw the poll. Perfect. I can't see the answers though. I can't see how the poll is rating there. Interesting. All right, so let's continue. So when we start to lose trust, right, and we start to lose the like, what is trust? Like, do we trust? There's a narrative, that a social narrative that everybody understands, and there's a fantastic documentary that you can look at there's actually multiple parts to this. It's by Adam Curtis, and he is a British documentarian called that he basically created a few documentaries, and my two favorite ones are Hypernormalization, and which this talk is based off of, and then you also have the Can't Get You Out of My Head, which is another fantastic BBC series. And basically what it looks like is the power structures and the trust models that essentially people have been creating around us. And how do we structure crime in these trust models? Because criminals have to establish trust models just as much as researchers and governments and civilians. Everybody creates these trust models. And what I want to look at is, in a world where, like, trust is getting harder and harder to establish and to trust things, because you don't trust the world around you. Like AI and deep fakes and everything is becoming more and more and hard to discern what is reality, and the uncanny valley is becoming a thing that is getting harder and harder to feel. It's looking at how are we going to be able to trust each other online, and let's have a look at that. So a lot of these platforms and a lot of the places that people first like go to, right, and to talk are changing, right? So we've seen, for example, people move from like forums, and then they were talking on Telegram, and then like those places are starting to move away, and you start to like Telegram is doing a lot of enforcement, but it's, of course, it's still ripe with activity. And then you have Discord, who is heavily used by the younger generation, and although it is a terrible platform to do this, but it's also like part of the gaming culture and the younger culture, right? So like a lot of servers become cybercrime related, right? But also it's a place where you can easily join, like on VC, which is voice chat, or you can just jump on a call and then you can start playing games, and then you can start sharing a lot of different threads, like the feature-rich, like closed off. Like technically Discord is the deep web, right? It's part of the deep web. It's not necessarily fully indexed by search engines. So it does cater to a bit of obfuscation and a bit of hidden, like, shadow economy from there. But I think what we're going to start to see is definitely a move towards more of like there's going to be, like, right now we're in a big flux of where are people going, and we've been in a big flux for more than a year. This all happened when Duval basically was arrested and was in France. And what we're seeing is that the shift now is going to become a little, I think someone's going to have to come and step in and formalize the process of how this is going, because at the time, Telegram did such a great job at it, and basically saying, like, this is where you can run like the main backbone of like communication for this type of network. But now I think we're seeing more and more people rely on talks. We're seeing more and more people rely on emails again, and we're seeing more and more people jump to sessions, Signal. But I think it's not necessarily, those are just like one-to-one or sort of group messaging. But what I want to see again is like that big platform. And Matrix, Noster is definitely some of the ones that we're going to see. But how do you establish trust between all of these sections, right? And how do you create this, because identity and trust are so closely related, how do you prove to yourself that you are who you say you are? Now, this is going to be something that we're going to explore. And I think this is a really interesting concept of creating these sort of like pseudo passports, right? That you can take from one ecosystem to the other to prove what you're capable of. And how do you vet yourself, right? And how do you vet yourself into these cyber criminal undergrounds and show that you can basically, without having to restart everything over, right? And without exposing yourself or burning an identity on a forum that you don't necessarily want, is there I think something's going to step in that's basically going to be a ledger to, or essentially the blockchain, something on the blockchain to basically say, like, this is what I can do, right? Just going to take a quick look at the questions here. Okay, perfect. If you have any questions, just drop them into the QA section or the chat. I will take a look. So let's talk about escrow and how that's going to change, or I think move in the next couple of years. So escrow, if you're looking back at like what Silk Road did, right? If you're looking back at what ransomware is doing, right? Like the traditional market escrows depended on manual verification, but we're seeing more and more pragmatic and smart contracts being leveraged for like multi-sig operations. And this is a really interesting concept where there's some really good legitimate applications that are doing this right now. And I think something like this can establish credibility, right? Because if your quote unquote crime passport can tap into this escrow, and this escrow, this history of your escrow can basically travel between these sections. So like if you have a group that you're trying to interact with that is operating on Telegram, and you've got this crime passport that basically shows that taps into like the escrow of exploit, or the escrow of ramp, the escrow of SXSS, the escrow of like the breach forums, you can basically show off your legitimacy, right? And if this legitimacy is like of that you are credible and say who you are, like, because threat actors are always trying to figure out a way to cut through the noise, cut through the distractions, cut through the researchers, cut through the law enforcement, cut through the honeypots. And having this way, like, so it would be harder for law enforcement to basically to fake something like this, because it would be on a blockchain. But at the same time, this crime passport would basically be connected to victims, right? And it would be a calling card that you have, and it would be connected to these escrows, and the escrows would be connected to each other. So it's basically, there's making things a lot more, because there's going to be a drive, and we're going to get through this, on how the solo affiliate is becoming more of a brand than just the group, right? Branding is now becoming very important, and because of artificial intelligence and like LLMs and also like Gen AI, we're seeing people really put some effort into that. So there are ways to do this now. Like there are really decent privacy frameworks like DarkFi, which I encourage you to go take a look at if you're not familiar with it, and Elio and Nim, and are like they're really, really powerful ways of testing smart contracts and escrows. And I think these are going to be some ways of seeing, but again, the problem with doing this, right, is that it requires a lot of effort, and it requires a lot of people coming together and and coming to this understanding that you're going to want to work in this fashion, right? And everything like starts. This is like done properly, but like the thing is that nobody is going to necessarily do things properly because it's going to take a lot of time and effort, and people don't want to put in the effort and everything. That's why we're still on Telegram, because it's easy, it's convenient, and it offers just the bare bones of theater and reach and features and the bare minimum of security to do what you need to do, even if they're complying with law enforcement, right? So that's why we're still on Telegram. That's why we're still using things like that. And it's like moving and changing requires effort. This is really like for like the people who are taking this seriously, right? And this is more of a like thought experiment on how to do this. I'm just going to take a quick look at the questions. Influencers, yes, absolutely, Christopher. Great point. Yes. And we're going to get to this, and I call it more like influencer, like affiliate driven or affiliate centric, but it's basically influencers. You're absolutely right. Leo, we absolutely need to stop scammers robbing our elders, and it's only going to get worse. So absolutely. Let's go back. So I want to talk about the next point, and I think this is a good time for the next poll question. Angela, if you could just put that up, please. So I'd love to see the... Awesome. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so in relation to the poll question, the what I wanted to say is like right now, when you're dealing with threat intelligence and you're dealing with incident response, or you're dealing with negotiations, and you have to deal with these threat actors, the like the consensus is that if you pay and then your data leaks, you trust them, you don't trust them. It's a challenge, right? Of like these groups are building a reputation. The name has a reputation, and you sort of, your trust is aligned with their past behaviors. Now, if you have this crime passport and basically it says like, but like you have, like, how can you establish trust that you've deleted data, right? And there, again, doing this the proper way, the like, I want to say almost like the pure academic way, if there was a way of creating a non-fungible token, and this token was connected to the data set, and if you can burn that token and that data set, and essentially the data would be deleted. There would be no recover. It would not be recoverable. Where do you host that data, right? Do we provide a centralized location that is like the middle ground of threat actors and law enforcement, like the parking lot, like when you're on Facebook Marketplace and you want to basically exchange goods, you have these like safe zones that you can go to that have like lighting and cameras and stuff like that. Do we create this neutral zone where we can host the data, right? But and that basically this data can be confirmed to by third parties that this data is confirmed, that is deleted. That's an idea, right? But again, they will always potentially have a copy of it. So we can't, the thing is that we can never fully understand unless that neutral zone becomes an area where you exfiltrate directly to. So then you basically can say like, look, we exfiltrated, like this would be like a known IOC, like we have exfiltrated to this location. We can prove that this is the only place that this was that this data was exfiltrated to, and if you pay, we can. But then the thing is that this data is like an escrow, and you have to pay to get it deleted. And the moral and ethical ambiguity of such a location that both sides control is going to be fascinating to explore. Yeah, who runs Vegas now? Private equity, exactly. That's a really good. Do not give bad actors ideas. This is what the future of cybercrime is, and this is the concept of this talk. Let's have a look at this. So let me go back to the slides here. I was looking at the questions. Perfect. So now we're going to be looking at state-backed sanctuaries. Now, this is a concept I've been thinking about, and the idea is that, for example, we are going to be in like the world, because of how the world is changing. And again, I don't want to get too political, but we are already seeing state-backed organized crime, right? So like the North Korean government, Russians, pretty much like just to name a few. The idea is that not necessarily on a smaller scale, I'm talking about, you can see that this is going to happen, and there's going to be a lot of like potentially, this already happens, right? So like you can see, like if you're traveling to a country and you commit a crime against that country's enemy, like there's going to be a bit of like laxity towards you. So this already happens in North Korea. This already happens. Well, people travel in North Korea to commit crime against Western allies, but basically we can start to see this potentially happening more, and especially as as politics become more and more one-sided, I want to say, and things become harder for people to live. You're going to start to see these like mercenary type of people who are going to be just as good at hacking and data extortion. And again, this is the scale of this is minuscule, but it's just an interesting idea of like criminal tourism could actually happen, right? Where you go to a country and you want to just commit a few crimes and against their allies or against their enemies, and then you can move forward with that. So it's an interesting concept, and not necessarily is something as advertised, but it's going to be something that is all done, like, again, as it is today, on the down low, off the books, and we're going to start seeing that. So what does that look like? Like, there's different types of that this can look like. We can have passive harbor. So for example, like the tactic is like non-extradition, there's legal ambiguity, like we just explained, and there's like selective enforcement, like what we just explained. And so we have, like, this already exists, right? But I think this is something that we need to talk about as it becomes more of a thing. Now, where I'm based in North America, I'm based in Canada, like this is not really something that happens like as much, and it's definitely something that you can definitely be unaware of, but everything can happen, right? So an example of this is like, for example, like local FSB linked intermediaries ensuring groups avoid domestic targets while sharing intelligence value. Or even like Russian-speaking ransomware groups like Lockbit, Black Basta, AlphaV, like operating openly on like RU forums. Like, so it's or like just like Russian forums. So this is basically the passive harboring of state-backed cybercrime. Now, there's going to be more of an active sanctuary as well. So this is like the integration of criminal operations into national strategy. And again, this already happens. And we're seeing this with like the DPRK, we're seeing this with Iran, where this is molded into policies, right? So for example, the DPRK's Lazarus groups using DeFi bridges and mixers like Tornado Cash to basically they do crypto heists, right? We see this at scale. We see this happening all the time. Or even like Iranian ABT fronts, like Cobalt Saplings and Argus, like deploying ransomware against financial adversaries. Myanmar and Cambodia doing this to basically host like VPS infrastructure for like GhostSec, right? So we see this happening because it can benefit them, and unless you are like basically like don't poop where you eat. So this is definitely something that's going to continue, and I think it is only going to become more of a thing as we go on. So now that we've explained escrows, we've explained like how the playing field for the underground is happening, I think we should really try to focus on like that zero knowledge, like cross-platform reputation system. And basically going back to this idea of how do you prove who you are is going to become a very, very important thing. I'm just going to go back to the questions here. Tornado Cash still exists. Yes, absolutely it does. Okay, perfect. So the idea that, yeah, like I think at the very bottom I wrote here, like this key has been completely, has completed 300 successful escrows and 0 disputes. Like that's the idea that I think we're going to start to see. And I think this is going to be something that we are going to have to see, especially through how, like right now, even if you want to be an affiliate on ransomware now, most of the top ransomware brands and most of the top ransomware groups are asking for a deposit, right? We saw groups like Nova explore the idea of doing advertisements. So if like you post about our group on a specific, or advertise our group on a specific number of forums, we would give you affiliate access. Lockbit is exploring with basically the idea of introducing a light version of their panel. And then once you have a victim, you would get access to, you've completed a victim, you would get access to the full panel. So this whole idea of trust, and then the deposits, like some deposits, like Dragon Force recently came out with a deposit of 500 USD to gain access to their platform. And then you have other groups that are asking for 1,000. There's some groups asking for 10,000. Like Chaos started at $10,000 in USD. Lockbit used to be $10,000, right? And then they've been slowly, steadily going down as their brand has been losing power and has been tarnished. So it's definitely something that we have to contend with and see, because once a system like this is implemented, right, and it actually is being used by everyone, it's going to be very difficult and such a ripe place to gain intelligence, because now you have a list of everyone's crimes, right? So it's going to be interesting, because once something like this happens and people can verify their crimes, it is going to be cryptographically even better to link everything together. So, because it's a double-edged sword. So one prototype that I found that can actually do something similar, like there's DarkFi's anonymous credential layer. That's really, really interesting. But there's also key oxide that is really interesting. And we're going to go into that in a little bit after, but it's DarkFi's ability to build on the Ethereum platform and the Ethereum blockchain and create your applications using these privacy first zero trust models. I think it's going to be something that because DarkFi, it's not just the one way to do it, but there's many, many different ways. But this is definitely, I think, what we can start to take a look at. So let's take a look at the next section. And this next section talks about something interesting. So power is always dangerous. It attracts the worst and corrupts the best. And basically, I need to talk about extortion. And extortion is something that happens. It's of course, like you're coercing and you're forcing someone to give you something. You're blackmailing them into giving you something. There's many different types of extortion. But we're seeing extortion get more violent and violent. Now, this is, for example, a video of the Doxbin leader getting punched and kicked. It has a lot of credibility issues, right? People are saying this was faked. People going on basically Doxbin's platform. And so this was used to extort the community and basically create an exit scam or an exit of Doxbin, because there's a lot of different players in that Doxbin world, and this was this is part of that lore. So the interesting thing is that we're going to start to see more and more extortion as a service. Now, I was actually very surprised that the Scattered Lapses Shiny Hunters group talked about this. And so basically, we're seeing a bit of this already, and especially that group is definitely at the forefront of this. But the idea, it's similar to how Anonymous basically creates their platforms and their campaigns. Like anybody can be Scattered Lapses Shiny Hunter, and anybody can become can claim and extort under that name, because that name carries, because of the big Salesforce breach, that name carries a lot of weight, and it carries a lot of notoriety. So groups are going to be able to use, or just like solo lone wolves are going to be able to use extortion names to extort their victims, just basically piggybacking off of the notoriety. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to take to look at, because affiliation and attribution is going to get a lot harder as time moves on, and because anybody can say anything and just advertise under a name, right? So it's like me saying today, like I'm basically hacking you and I'm just claiming it under anonymous, right? So that's going to be something that we need to figure out. And looking at the indicators of compromise, looking at the tactics and the techniques and the procedures of specific attacks, and sharing that information so that we understand the true, understand better attribution, is going to become essential. So like the criminals are going to be sharing in their own trust bubbles and trust groups, we as researchers and on the defensive side need to share what we find as well, because if we keep things siloed, we will not be able to defend against this new wave of crime that is coming. So this is exactly what I was talking about. So this is Scattered Lapses Shiny Hunters, basically talking about extortion as a service, or EAS. And basically they're saying, similar to how a RAS program works with no locking encryption, there will be a portal dedicated to this and instructions on how to partake in this service. And so basically so a lot of these groups, like I think what we're going to start to see, especially as we move towards the influencer affiliate and towards the EAS, extortion as a service, like the groups are going to start functioning a little bit like forums. And then we're basically coming full circle again, where groups would advertise on forums, and then like the name of the user becomes so powerful that now they're branching out, and then you can basically pivot underneath them and leverage their name. So we're going to start to see that. And I really think that this is a prediction that actually we are already seeing it, but like we're going to start to see the dedicated leak sites on Onions acting more like forums where people can post the leaks, and it's basically going to start to happen like a forum and function like a forum. I think that's going to be a very interesting development that can happen. All right, I was just looking at the questions. So let's talk about Scattered Laspis Shiny Hunters. Very interesting group. And let's talk about that and how they actually operate, because this is going to be a technique that and tactics and procedures that are going to become more and more leveraged, because we're seeing some of the biggest breaches right now aren't happening because of 0 days. Some of the biggest breaches that we're seeing right now is because someone is logging into a panel and exporting it, right? And they're finding credentials, Okta or Jira or Slack or Microsoft credentials. They're finding them in Stealer logs, and they are exporting directly from the panel. And they're able to just basically compile that data. It's already like compiled. It's already structured, and they're able to go through it and extort based off of that. So there's going to be a lot of theater as well. Like we've already seen how the counterintelligence campaign that Scattered Laspis Shiny Hunters did, where they would basically flood signal channels with keywords. And basically that overstimulated and overloaded a lot of intelligence applications, basically because they knew we are searching based on keywords. And we need to start to think of that if we're looking for keywords, they're going to start posting just keywords to create more noise, right? Because we were looking for keywords to sift through the noise, but the keywords can become the noise now. So adding contextualization in terms of how we're going to be able to deal with searching through this maze is going to become really interesting, and intent is going to become very, very important. And being able to sift through all of this data and look for the intent of what people are actually leaking and talking about is something that we need to look at. So as we were discussing, Scattered Laspis Spider did almost 1 billion records. This was a huge breach, and they were basically extorting not just Salesforce, but every single little company that they were talking about underneath there. So I won't necessarily get into the names of those companies, but basically that was, I'm not in the game of naming and shaming, but Salesforce was a big one. So that's just for the news purposes. So the how they did it was basically they used vishing, right, and OAuth to abuse and bypass identity controls, and they just exfiltrated, like I said, through the panel. This is very, very textbook for them to do, and it's what most people are doing nowadays. And the thing about vishing is that, as we were going to see in the AI section, it's getting so easy to do, right? And it's getting so deceptively easy to do. There are even legitimate companies. There's this, when I was at Sector, shout out to Ghost Eye, they did an incredible platform where they were basically leveraging artificial intelligence to social engineer people. And this is basically like, so what would happen is that it would go, their platform would go online and do OSINT, and this is agentic, and it would figure out like who you are and like what's a good way of socially engineering you and tricking you. And one of the examples that was given to me was that if it found out that you were going to a conference, it would basically craft this agentic artificial intelligence would craft an email and send it to you saying that, oh, your conference ticket is canceled. I'm so sorry. Please call us here. And then another agentic AI would take the phone call that, and then it would basically try to get you to reset your password so that you could basically lose control. And this was all done through artificial intelligence. So this was a very interesting concept. But like, if we're having companies leverage this right now and it's actually in a state that is actually really good, wait until you have individuals that aren't as necessarily well funded as a startup or a corporation, and start to leverage this, and the tools, more tools become open source, and the frameworks become open source to do this. So this is really going to start accelerating. So we're going to have to see some really interesting things. So the idea now is really, when it comes to extortion, is do you need to lead, like, what's more powerful, right? Is it the ransomware where the encrypting it, or the encryption is the important part, or is it the leaking that's the important part? And again, it all depends on the victim. It depends on and it's very, like, there's a lot of groups that are moving towards just leaking now. So we saw this with, like, for example, Hunters International, moving with becoming World Leaks, and basically saying, well, we don't want to do ransomware anymore. We're just going to start leaking data. And then we have other groups that are very focused on creating encryptors, right? So, and still believing into that, and still using that that method. So it's going to be an interesting concept of seeing, like, is this going to be like a world where this is still both sides, or are more people just going to start leaking? The thing about leaking is that it costs money, right? To do it right, and because it's all about a threat. Like, if you have a legitimate ability to leak data at scale quickly and to resist takedowns, then you have a credible threat of being able to leak data. If you are just using, like, Mega, right? Yeah, so the data is quick, you can download it quickly, and it can spread quickly, but it's not takedown resistant. You can always take down something from Mega. So you have to re-upload it, right? And you have to continuously update the new links, so people have to continue, so that the leak can continue to spread. Now, on the flip side is, like, and ransomware is, if you encrypt data, you can hold it as a ransom, and then the victim is responsible for holding all of that encrypted data. Like, you don't have to pay for hosting, you don't have to pay for bandwidth, right? Like, if you were leaking, like, you just have to worry about making sure that the decryptor and your encryptor works. And that's also a level of engineering and a level of sophistication and development that not everybody has. We've all had terrible experiences with decryptors. And there's always some horror stories there, but that's an interesting idea of, like, where is this going to go? And I think we're going to start to see more and more leaks coming out, because it is faster. It basically, you're in and out quicker. Your dwell time, your network dwell time, is significantly shorter, because you don't have to bypass a whole bunch of EDRs, and you just have to figure out how to either leak data from an internal network, or leak data from a panel, right, through stolen credentials. So definitely the leaking is going to become something that is going to be bigger, and being able to monitor the leak section is going to become more and more important. So I think that there's definitely going to be a side where leaking is going to become even more of an issue. Now, we've alluded to this a little bit, and this is the affiliate-centric model now that we're seeing, part of this extortion model. And so, example here is that a lot of these groups now, like Beast, for example, is putting out and showing who the partners of, and who is responsible for each breach, right? So we're seeing not only Beast do this, but we're seeing Nova do this as well, right? And we're seeing the affiliates now. So this is, like, again, you're getting that a forum idea, and this is basically a way to promote and to incentivize affiliates to come to work for you. And there's this idea of like notoriety that comes with it, right? So that like there's the fame that comes with being there and seeing your name on Nova, right? Because Nova's a brand, and seeing your name on that can be an incentive enough of you to work essentially for free at the start, right? Because ransom payments aren't for sure. I remember hearing a statistics from Killen's side where they were saying that 1 in 20 victims pay well. So it's a pretty intense stat, but like getting good affiliates now is getting harder and harder. And even Killen does this, right? We saw this with Devman, who started off with Killen, and now we're seeing this with Secura Trope, who started off with Killen and essentially moved to their own DLS, Secura Trope. And they branched out on their own. But definitely we're seeing this more and more now. It's becoming more popular to list the affiliates underneath each, to basically promote affiliates now. And these like ransomware sites are becoming more a bit like a forum. So I'm just going to take a quick pause here, and I think it's a good time to look at the third poll. Yeah, I was a bit late on that one, sorry. But yeah, so what's the most powerful form of leverage today? Is it the fear of exposure? Is it the reputation, the access, encryption? I just wanted to see how people are reacting to this. It depends on the victim, Mikhail. Exactly, it does. Absolutely, it does. But overall, I would like to ballpark it, see what people think. Okay, let's go back to the conference here. So the webinar. All right, so affiliate driven is going to be interesting. So I've started to see evidence of this, and this is a really, really interesting concept where the language around this is interesting. Ransomware groups make a lot of money, can make a lot of money. Like operations like the big ones, right? Dragon Force, Killen, Lockbit, have made substantial millions, right? What if people started investing in them, and there was a way for you to essentially get a return on it? So this is like capital private equity investing in them. And I saw essentially one group talking about this the other day, where they were looking for investors to jumpstart and to take a percentage of the cut of the ransom. Now, how you're going to do a model, a trust model, to make sure that this is not an exit scam is something that's going to take some really good engineering on terms of like social engineering and in terms of like creating trust groups. But it is interesting to see that people are already starting to think about it, because the business can be so profitable that right now, like, there is money to be made. And even now there's an idea of becoming an investor and of investing in something that you can make passive income from. And it's basically like investor-led ransomware can become a thing where, but again, how do you create this shadow network and this shadow economy where people are investing in this stuff without getting caught? And how do you cash out? Because that's how everyone everyone is a big word, but how most people get caught is through cashing out. How do you make that happen is going to be interesting. So let's take a look at the next section. And so this is a great quote from Sidney J. Harris, an American journalist. And this is: the real danger is not that computers will begin to think like men, but that men will begin to think like computers. I absolutely love that quote. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that in memes. We're starting to see that in memes today of like on TikTok of like any basic social interaction that happens, people are asking ChatGPT, what do I do next? What do I do next? And even people are starting to talk as if they were, their dialogue was written by ChatGPT. So it's really interesting to see that. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. Perfect. So today, LLMs are everywhere. They're basically reshaping every single layer of cybercrime that we have. And it's a fantastic is probably the wrong word for it, but it's a very interesting concept of how do you protect yourself against something like that? Just a few months ago, we saw the first ESET came out onto the scene with this report saying that they had found or basically observed one of the first AI like artificially intelligence LLM ransomware. Now, this was proven to be researchers from the University of New York that were behind it. But what's interesting is that this was something that essentially is going to start happening more. Like once you have a POC out there, you have other people looking at it, you have like, you can't underestimate criminals. There's some really smart people out there that will do it for money, right? There's always someone that is smart enough out there that will do it for the right price. And with things like with the economy, when economies get harder out there, right? And with that shift, when people get laid off from jobs, right? And you have these mass layoffs that happen at these really big corporations, and then you have like people that cannot renew their visas because of regulatory issues and government policies, and that they have to basically like think of going back or looking at a different industry. And you have all these peoples with highly sophisticated skill sets that are now like going out on their own. And there's this whole underworld economy that is just waiting for them, right? So that's going to be an interesting way to see how these LLMs and these things just accelerate everything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good, right? But it just makes the ability to process so much information so quickly. It just, for me, artificial intelligence just means speed. And you still need to go through it, but it really just means speed of looking at malware, speeding. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but you get the idea. We're already seeing threat actors exploring like concepts like Worm GPT and Fraud GPT. These were very basic wrappers, and they basically were jailbreakers of early ChatGPT, where they would pad and your request with these like jailbreak prompts. And these jailbreak prompts would basically like allow you to go and operate outside of the guardrails and the ethical guardrails of the LLM that you were using. But because like building your own artificial intelligence, like there's Llama, of course, but you need a powerful enough rig to run that, right? In any meaningful way. And then you also need data to train your LLM on, right? And your artificial intelligence on. So it's like, even though we have these home-based solutions, like it will never be as good as like the ChatGPT or the Gemini, or the Anthropic. So like we need to, like people are going to start to look at these options of like, how do you create these LLMs, right? And it's always about socially engineering LLMs that we're seeing. But if someone can create and host and train like these really big, like, and make money off of it, right? Like if there was like we are definitely going to start to see this where people are training like large, like real large llama models, or and then these or other open source models. And these models are you pay a subscription, like Dark GPT is already doing something like similar. And you're basically but as long as it's not like a wrapper for a jailbroken prompt, like you're actually hosting the data yourself. And then what happens if you start training that data on exfiltrated data, like data leaks, right? So then you start to put like credentials in there. You can start to put like things in there, and you make this available to people, right? That is something that is definitely possible, right? And within the realm, and it's very scary what people can start to do with this idea. And the thing is that we're seeing deception becoming becoming more and more automated. And we talked a little bit, we briefly discussed like deep fakes and things like that and vishing, but like in Hong Kong in 2024, a finance firm lost $25 million after an AI cloned executive's voice led to a fraudulent wire transfer, right? That's huge. And you have platforms like 11 Labs and HeyGen that are incredible open source voice clones, and that we can use. Like I can actually show you something like this. I don't know if it's going to completely shabosh this. There we go. Perfect. You can see it. All right. So this is 11 Lab. And essentially, you can do text to speech and you can play it. And it uses its own proprietary AI. And this is really, really scary stuff, how well it can be used. Absolutely, people are going to be using this. And then we have HeyGen, which is the other one. So I just made a free account, and you can basically go here and you can basically start to bring deepfake yourself into videos like this. And this uses Gemini and VO as a backbone, but just to give you an idea, and which is heavily credit based, so you can't really export en masse with this, but this gives you an idea of like what's possible. Now, the other thing as well is that not only is this stuff available like on like platforms, but this is also available through Telegram bots, right? So, for example, there's a service, a deepfaker bot on Telegram that you can just upload your videos to, and you can just do it straight from Telegram, right? And this leverages the deepfaker API, and it basically makes everything super, super accessible. And it's an issue, and we need to be prepared for this as this becomes more and more of a thing. And threat actors are going to use it for sextortion. Threat actors are going to use it for fraudulent charges, for synthetic identities. So this is creating real world people for misinformation and for disinformation. It's going to become more and more rampant as we go on. We have to have ways of not necessarily of detecting it. Again, this whole talk has been about trust and how do we detect it, but it's also the creating the tools, but it's also going to be how do we create and educate the population into being ready for things like this. Let's go to the next poll question, actually. I think that would be a good idea. So the question is, when AI starts writing and running attacks autonomously, who should be held accountable? So again, these are just thought experiments. I want to see how people react to these. It's not necessarily a right or wrong answer or anything like that. I just want to see how things are going to happen here. Roxanne had an excellent point here in terms of defending against phishing attacks, is using a safe word or a phrase, right, to verify. I think that is a very, very good option there, and something that is a very good idea. All right, awesome. So let's get back to it. So now that we have the synthetic synergy of, we've seen worlds of basically these characters that are being created, and we don't know where they are, right? There's this incredible book called 2041, AI 2047. And basically this book is an anthology of stories. And one of them is something that basically talks about creating this fully AI character. And it is like a podcast host. And this podcast host is completely AI driven. And like, this is like a YouTuber, completely AI. And you just imagine the reach and the speed at which you can generate content, that you can basically react to the ever-changing, like what you put out there. You can basically mold you can put out information, people will, or like basically data, and people will react to that. And then basically people will come back, you can basically mold that reaction. But because it's AI and the speed of which you can do it, and once that becomes more of an affordable and a household thing, like we're going to have to make sure that these companies are able to address like fake content creators and fake and AI created synthetic identities. Now, the government is using some really interesting things, right? Project Maven, for example, in terms of like using like artificial intelligence, they're using this thing called Project Maven, which is an automated way at processing very large amounts of full motion video and imagery data from like drones. And this is scary. And a lot of like Google engineers that had been essentially recruited to go work on Project Maven have actually said they do not want to work on Project Maven anymore. What's interesting as well as I think is that like once you start to see like what these surveillance and these AIs are doing for surveillance, and the amount of at speed at which it can process, we're going to be a lot of people are going to start doing a counter culture to this. We're already seeing people using face paint, a way of blocking facial recognition, right? Or using different types of caps with a little bit of an infrared flashlight, or like a little light at the cap portion. And basically that blocks cameras, right? And you just appear as a blob, which is a bit of the symbology here, because in this deck, I was trying to figure out like how do I create these characters that create identity, but also like it's a fingerprint. It's like Gravatar. Everyone has a unique face and a unique fingerprint. So this is going to be a really interesting part where we have so much surveillance, and a lot of this surveillance is algorithmically driven. How do we basically protect ourselves, and how do and then criminals are going to be the first ones to really start to, and researchers and think tanks and stuff like that, and privacy advocates and activists are going to be the ones at the forefront of looking at this and creating options that will later be used for crime. That's always how it is, of course, but definitely this is where we want to start taking a look at things. So the next section I want to talk about is quantum computing. Now, the thing about quantum computing, and this is Eric Feynman, has the best quote on quantum mechanics, I think. And that is, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. And I think that is still very true today. And with quantum, I think we are going to be in for a rude awakening. And quantum is definitely going to become a thing. It's just that I don't think it's going to become a thing, a household thing, right? Quantum is on the horizon, but quantum is it's so precise, right? And it needs to be, and it's so expensive that you won't be able to have a quantum computer anytime soon, at least in the next 5 years, like what we're looking at in this presentation. Is we're not going to be able to see quantum-based like computers in your household or quantum like a quantum computer in your cell phone, right? And quantum really just means that you have access to even more speed, right? It's not necessary. You're able to do computations that would take you. There was a Chinese quantum computer that was able to process a calculation in 200 milliseconds that would have taken a classical computer 2.5 billion years, right? So we're looking at quantum is not necessarily going to be something that people are going to have access to. It's only going to be research facilities, certain private companies like Google, IBM, D-Wave, and absolutely governments and militaries and things like that. Now, but what's going to be, and threat actors are always listening to the radio, right, or to the news. They're always there, and they're always trying to get creative. How can they leverage, right, this new breakthrough? Once it becomes a thing that we have cracked RSA or officially cracked RSA, right? Or leveraging like Shor's factorization or Shor's algorithm. Like once we have access to, once we've cracked it, I think there's going to be a wave of people saying that the extortion is going to become really clever. We're already seeing like active campaigns by the US, China, Russia, like every country is doing this right now, where you're harvesting now to decrypt later. And so you're hoarding and hoarding and hoarding and hoarding encrypted data for once you have the ability to decrypt it, or there's a vulnerability in an algorithm, or if you have enough brute forcing power, you can get through that leak, that data. So a lot of these leaks that we're going to see in the potential future, these are nation state leaks, right? These are not necessarily like scattered spider level, or these are like APT level, but these are leaks that potentially like WikiLeaks can get their hands on, or DDoS secrets can get their hands on, right? So these are the types of leaks that whistleblowers can get their hands on if they're ever decrypted at that level. But once we can start cracking a lot of this encryption, it's like we're going to have to start thinking of like how do we protect old, like that's the big question, is how do we protect old currently encrypted systems, right? Like AES is quantum safe, at least for now, from what we've seen. But like other things like RSA, for example, is not safe. Anything that uses factorialization is not safe. So ECC, EDH is not safe. So so those like SHA-256, right? Those are not safe algorithms. So how do you have to go back and encrypt everything, or do you with the new quantum safe algorithms, or do you essentially just put a wrapper on everything, and then because that could corrupt data if you can't unlock it properly? So that puts you in a very interesting position. And this whole like harvest now, decrypt later can work in both ways. So we actually have to see how things go. So what I actually think is going to be interesting is like the whole idea of, because not every country is going to be able to have a quantum computer, right? It's going to be only the most advanced. It's one of those advanced technologies that not everyone's going to be able to have access to or have the money to spend on. And as time goes on, a lot of these like private companies, I believe, are going to start shutting down, that are running quantum computers. And it's really only going to be used at the highest level. And it's going to be one of those technologies that will run in the background, but it's not going to be like AI where it's in everyone's hands and everybody's interacting with it every day. But it's definitely going to be something that's going to power some of the other things, because there's very limited applications that you can do with artificial intelligence, like with quantum mechanics and in quantum computers. It just makes things faster, right? So you can look at processing like financial data. You can look at maybe the aviation sector and looking at like logistics, things like that would make more sense. But there is and if you're combining it with artificial intelligence, then it makes sense. But we have, once we get like the error correction and we get enough qubits going, that's basically where we're at right now. But I think this whole idea of like quantum extortion that I've been hearing about is not going to be something that is going to be a threat, and necessarily a big threat, unless you're a nation state or APT level. And even smaller threat actor groups, like, since they don't have access to quantum computers, unless they can like do the theater and show credibility that they have they have access to it, which is, again, can all be faked, right? Then they're saying like, I can decrypt your data. So like stealing encrypted data and then creating these like decryption markets is going to be interesting. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, but essentially that's what we're looking at. And like bluffing is going to be such an interesting concept of like, I can basically decrypt because of the harvest now and decrypt later, that whole idea of saying like, hey, I can decrypt your data, and I have decrypted your data. I know what you're going to do, or I know what you did, right? Is going to be something that's like we haven't seen before, right? We have, but it's going to become a new world of like, who's bluffing for real. Let's actually go back to the polls now. I'm going to switch out to this. Let's go to the next poll. So the question is, if you knew quantum computing would decrypt everything in 10 years, would you still trust encryption today? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So we have yes, defense in depth still matters. No, assume compromise now. Depends who gets quantum first. And I already assume everything is public. So I'd love to see what your thoughts on that is. Awesome. So very good. There's some great comments here and questions that I will get to in just a bit. So let me take a look at these questions now. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. So as we discussed with, like, for example, the shiny scattered lapses, shiny hunters, a lot of this is going to be theater, right? especially if a group like that gets their hands on a narrative like that and on a performance like that. It's going to be really interesting to see how this happens. Like, we're going to see like military secrets, we're going to see government secrets. That's why I don't think that this is necessarily going to become a thing where, because like these types of leaks are already happening, and they're happening through like WikiLeaks, they're happening through DDoS secrets. So I think like we're not even going to be seeing many of these leaks at least at the public surface level. I think these are going to be more on like an intelligence department type of like Cold War that's going to happen. And the public is not necessarily going to be very aware of this at this point, because just of how rare it is going to be to have access to these types of computers. So an idea, and this is, again, the evolving concept of the scam markets. And it's so fascinating for me to see scammers scamming scammers. And it's something that happens a lot. And where, again, we've been talking about trust, and this whole conversation today has been about trust and how we are, how even threat actors are creating, are struggling with that, right? And it's an issue that even they have to contend with. So there's going to be, I think, at least an attempt at creating this scam, and this is really a scam. Where you're going to have these fake forums or these fake marketplaces that are basically going to peddle decrypted quantum data, right? Or like decrypted, like quantum decrypted leaked information. And now these sites could be state run, and if they are, then the credibility goes a little bit up. But basically the idea is that you can start to see these dedicated leak sites pertaining towards like the quantum decryption, and that could be a thing. I think that's very far out. I don't think we're going to be seeing that anytime soon, but that is going to be a direct reaction to when it is announced that we've cracked RSA, like officially cracked, or we have enough qubits to run Shor's algorithm. I think that's going to be a direct creation that's going to happen. It's these decryption markets. And we're going to start to see this. I think it's going to come quite fast, right? And it's going to be nuanced. Like, people are not necessarily, like, people are going to start trying to leverage it in terms of like the scam portion of like, hey, we can decrypt your history, we can decrypt parts of your life, we can decrypt like when you protect things and your data is stolen. Like, I think we're going to start to see this new wave of like, there's a lot of these, like, those emails and those text messages, those like extortion campaigns where they target like individuals. This is not necessarily going to be like something that attacks like corporations, but this is going to be a type of scam that potentially happens directly to you, and where it's like, oh, I implanted like the sextortion of like, I have leaked images of you. And basically now it's just going to be added quantum once it, like, the word, and it goes into the zeitgeist enough of like, okay, quantum has cracked encryption. People won't necessarily understand what that means, and or the intricacies of it. It's going to be more of like, okay, now everything that I had encrypted might not necessarily be good anymore or safe. So now it's going to be like another like millennial, like Y2K moment potentially, where people are going to be like, okay, I need to make sure that the data I have is safe, right? And there's absolutely going to be a movement on that capitalization of, and it's going to be quick, it's going to be hard, of like, we can decrypt your data, we have access to a quantum computer, and that's what we're going to leverage it for. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be, especially with how good AI is going to be at that point. we need to be ready for that, right? We need to put out a campaign, I think, an education to the masses where we explain that just because quantum can crack factorialized and specific algorithms, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of your data is now readable by anyone, right? Like there's definitely going to be there's a quantum privilege that comes with this, right? And not everybody has that quantum privilege. This is mainly going to be like militaries in certain countries. Like not every country can have this. So definitely something that we have to factor in. I'm just going to take a look at the questions here. Okay, perfect. So it's definitely like what I was explaining before. The bluff is definitely going to be something that's going to be like once a country, whoever's first, has cracked RSA or SHA-256 or because once you crack SHA-256, that's all the crypto that goes out. Right, like like most of Bitcoin and a lot of cryptocurrencies operate on SHA-256. So once you can crack that, it's going to be interesting. Another thing that's going to be interesting is another network that uses SHA-256 is BitTorrent. So does that mean that you can so if you start with a hash, does that mean you can create data from the hash if you have a strong enough quantum computer? And that's, again, years from now. And does that count as now like the ultimate form of compression, where you can just basically give someone a hash and then they can leverage a quantum computer and like recreate the data based on that hash by just brute forcing random bits and bytes to recreate what data was there. So again, this is more like science fiction, of course, but I don't want to get into that role. But it's an interesting idea of like what can happen, right? With once quantum becomes powerful enough, like it's going to be interesting to see like the different types of ideas that people have and how they can how people are going to leverage it. So the thing is as well is that I really want to get into is going to be the black market of time. And I think this is going to be an interesting concept. So we already know that state actors are stockpiling encrypted archives. And we already know that these leaks and old emails and health databases are all stored for the eventual quantum unlocking that's going to happen, right? Like, but again, AES is safe for now, right? So the concept that there's a ticking time of when is my data going to be decrypted, right? Is that now like the new ransom countdown, right? Just by creating a new technology, it feels like we are looking at a ransom blog with that countdown timer. And so are we going to be able to say like, hey, I have like, are we going to be able to extrapolate that concept and apply that to dedicated leak sites of basically showing decryption attempts? And once we have enough power and we're able to brute force, will we be able to show that on a dedicated leak site, fake decryption progress? And again, most of this is scamming, right? There's no way hackers or like even like anyone that we're dealing with, like mostly in terms of the in terms of the cyber criminals that we're dealing with, like this is nation state, right? I just want to make that extremely clear. But these are the things that that people are going to try to bluff into their ways of saying that they have access to. So it's going to be interesting. So I wanted to finish off this this section and this talk with a concept, because now that we've talked about trust, there's one more concept that I really think that we should talk about, and that it plays hand in hand with trust. And George Orwell basically says it the best, is like, who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past.
George Orwell has been pretty right about a lot of things recently. So it's looking pretty creepy, and in a way of his science fiction is becoming predictions, right? So, but I wanted to talk about power and the interplay between the groups and how they are interconnected, right? And how when one group, the Hydra, right? There's the Hydra, but also when not necessarily the Hydra, but when one player, the Goliath, is so big and leaves the space, it leaves a power vacuum. And we have already seen this happen. And specifically, I'm referring to Lockbit in this case scenario right now. And so the discreditation, the destabilization, the disruption of Lockbit that happened last year and this year have been so successful that essentially the brand has been tarnished, right? And it was a multifaceted attack on the brand of Lockbit to essentially the whole idea was to not necessarily just attack who and what Lockbit was, and because they knew who he was, but it was also to, because it was the brand, it was such a powerful brand, right? It was to discredit the brand. And once Lockbit was out of the equation, what we started to see was more groups started to move around, and people started to move around, and other groups started to pop up and take their position and try to take their place in this world. So it's interesting to see how this is going to play out. But let's explore digital sovereignty. So as the world as cybercrime becomes around, like, is factored around geopolitics, and we saw like the state-backed sanctuaries, and there's really going to be a lot of concepts around how do people start influencing themselves. Like, once you start to put all of these pieces together, you've got your digital, your cybercrime passport, your crime passport. You've got your essentially your stolen data. You've got AI being able to create synthetic individuals or create phishing emails and start to write code or start to operate autonomously. Like, you are talking about an online world that is going to be so fast and so powerful. How do you control that, right? We're seeing people right now, like groups like Dragon Force, try to pump the brakes on things and are starting a coalition. And they announced around September 15th. If you look at the date of the screenshot, but of the post, but I think this was an edit on the post. I think it was done a little later than that, because I'm surprised that a lot of the cybersecurity community missed that announcement. But I think it was just an edit to the post, and the post was originally made on September 15th, but the edit saying that they are part of a coalition now with Lockbit and Killin was done a little later. I think something like that is like, you're going to start to see more consolidation in terms of the groups, and we're going to start to see people try to like, these groups try to take on more responsibility and more power. And when we're looking at these power structures and this hierarchy in the underground world, it doesn't just go like if you're just looking at what's on the forums, you don't see the full picture, right? There's so much happening in private channels. There's so much happening in the real world, right? With drop zones and actual real life interactions with these individuals, because a lot of these individuals actually talk to each other in person. So and know who they are, right? And go to the same school, or go to hang out in the same city, right? Or go to the same clubs and bars and stuff like that, or went to they were part of the same military unit, right? A lot of these things, like, people know more than what we see online. Like, if just looking online is only scratching the iceberg, and there's so much more to interactions, right? So we need to look at what people are doing as well, and how the power is going to be distributed. So as AI becomes like new tools for promoting propaganda, now this is something that like governments can use, but for cybercrime, we're looking at like, I'm really looking towards the latest campaign from Scattered Laspis Shiny Hunters, and that theater that they performed. Right, it was very noisy. Um, it was very aggressive. Right, and the timing was very spot on. The so and a lot of the text that was being and even some of the text that they were using was written by AI, but at the same time, what was really interesting by that was they were using multiple people, part of the admins of these channels, right? And if you were attempting to do like stylometric analysis, it would try to evade that by having multiple people write it, or just there was just the one admin writing differently. And we recently saw like potential docs of one of the admins, a Russian national who is living in Turkey right now. So it's interesting to see like the power dynamics between groups. Scattered Laspis Shiny Hunters was calling out Clop because Clop was coming into the spotlight with their performative mission, and of like the EBS, so the Oracle EBS breaches, and they were basically stealing the headlines and stealing the news cycle, right? So that was something that they wanted to capitalize on, basically being in the news cycle for that extended period of time, for that month or so. They were very, very savvy in that way. I think we're going to start to see more of that, right? That blending of social media savviness, which is like what the younger generations are part of it, and like the news cycle. I think that has always been a scattered spider approach, and I think that is definitely like something that is going to be even more used. And since they're going to be using it with AI now, and that's going to become even more powerful. And since they're using more AI, like, we're going to be, as defenders, we're going to be interacting with AI more, and it's going to become such a thing where everything is just going to be AI. We're going to be negotiating with AI. We are going to use AI to negotiate with their AI, right? So like, and it's going to be a really interesting. If things get to that point, it's just that we've lost grasp and we've lost the thread, right? And I hope that's not what it is. I'm just going to go take a look at the questions. All right, just taking a look here. Awesome. Let's go back to the slides. So my concept now is that with power, right? Power is going to be interesting because now we're going to see quantum is going to basically get rid of a lot of, it's going to become this power that can in an answer that people can say to security, right? And the threat actors are definitely going to use it, right? And when they say like, oh, we can crack your artificial intelligence, like we can crack your data, we can crack your systems, that's going to be something that they're going to use. quantum resistant algorithms are already being used by groups, right? But the thing is that they are taking on so much. It's slow, first of all, but also like quantum resistant and quantum ready communication is very bandwidth intensive. Speaking in terms of relative to what today's handshake sizes are. But if you're looking at like Signal just recently released their quantum ready white paper, and they've done a fantastic job at outlining how they handled the network situation and the traffic situation for quantum communication. I highly recommend going to. I will be talking about that more in the after show on Discord, but that is something that I think a lot of people should go and have a look at. There's also this, now that you have AI that is just basically rewriting reality, we need to be ready for that. And we need to, threat actors are already using it, but and here's the thing, we have a generation, and if you look at it more on a psychological and on a sociological level, you have people now that are growing up with just AI, right? We had I'm a millennial, and there was a time where there was my generation grew up with the personal computer in the household, and I grew up with seeing internet for the first time coming into my household, right? There was I saw the advent. There was a time before Google and there was a time after Google, right? Now this is going to, with AI, we're seeing there's going to be a generation where they've only seen AI, right? And they've only seen the slop, right? And they've only seen the people coming through and being molded, and their personalities and their minds being molded by AI. So the corporations that are training these models, and now an interesting fact as well is that Google has removed most of their web pages, right? And what happens is that before you can go up to hundreds of pages on their search results, now you can only go up to 10 or so search pages, and that was deliberately done to restrict the training size of AI crawlers. And so it's an interesting aspect of these corporations can control the open source data that a lot of the models are getting trained on. So it's going to be a very difficult aspect of what are we going to do, right? And I'm very interested to see how things progress and how things go. Yeah, so let's take a look at the questions now. And if you have any questions, drop them into the chat. Perfect. Let's take a look at this. All right, so I got the questions here. And actually, I wanted to run the last, actually, I think this is a great time. Angela, can we run the last poll before everyone leaves? All right, so the poll is, who will hold the most power in the next decade? Is it going to be nation states? Is it going to be corporations? Is it going to be the algorithms, or is it going to be the criminal ecosystems? I'd love to see what y'all think of that. Yes, DM. An awfully thin line between these four categories is what I was getting at. Yes, absolutely. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting how things are going to. Roxanne says, I think it will be nation states based on the general authoritarian and power centralization trend. It's going to be interesting. In the new Alien Earth series, 7 corporations control the planet. That is interesting as well. I highly recommend reading AI 2027. It is a fantastic book, and basically a research paper. It basically explains like what artificial intelligence would look like in the next couple of years. I took a lot of my research from there, and I'm going to be dropping the cited PowerPoint presentation and everything, with all my citations and all my research backing in the Academy library, so you can all have a look at that. So there's going to be, I think you meant, yeah, AI 2041. That was the book that I referenced, but it's actually, let me show you the other, what I actually mean, AI. Here we go. This is the report that I actually am talking about. Here, let me show you the research and the PDF. Here we go. I'm just going to stop sharing and share the other screen. Here we go. So this is a fantastic research that I think all of you should have a look at. And basically, they're predicting that the impact of superhuman AI over the next decade will be enormous, exceeding that of the Industrial Revolution. The research is done very well. It's peer-reviewed. There's a PDF of it that you can watch it watch a video about it on YouTube, and there is an audio version of it. This was published in April of 2025, and essentially it breaks down that the models that are going to be coming out are just going to be so powerful, right? And it talks about like how China wakes up, and also it talks about how AI will take the jobs, and how basically these agentic models, once they start using agentic models to improve themselves, the runaway effect that will happen. So I highly recommend reading this. I will actually drop a link here. Highly recommend it. Stephanie, the after party is going to be in roughly 15 minutes. It's going to be on the Discord voice chat, and we can discuss there. So just going to go through with a couple more of these questions since I have time here. I'm trying to, my screen is all small. I'm trying to see the questions here. I have a question regarding, okay, so this is from Nirijan Hedges. Apologies if I mispronounce your name. I have a question regarding the figures in the slides. How did you generate such figures? Was it using AI? If so, what tool and what was the prompt? I really like those figures. So that is, I spent a lot of time working on my slides, and a lot of it is, I used ChatGPT to create those characters, and I spent a lot of time crafting the characters. Not a lot of time, but I spent time to and basically doing something called world building, and basically creating a character that is going to be interesting for people to look at and to tell my story with. So the characters were inspired by a lot of different things.
Part of it was a exhibition that I saw about black holes, and basically the little void at the center of their face was a primordial black hole. So just in terms of aesthetics, that's what I was going with. And then it's also like a gravatar and a fingerprint, so that everybody had a different look and a different swirl and a different kaleidoscopic effect on their face. So basically showing the individual of a digital being and of an ethereal digital being. But I also wanted to basically segment them into different districts. So you had like the red light district, the blue light district, the green light district, and they each had their own style and fashion that I basically was using. And I love fashion. I follow a lot like Vogue magazine and different fashion trends, and I was basically telling it to use like different types of fashion. You can dress them up in using avant-garde or high fashion, streetwear, tech wear, and I was fine-tuning a lot of the characters that way. So that's how I generated those. Let's go to the next one. So this is a question by Stephanie Honoré. In a recent candid exchange with a Russian hacker affiliated with Black Hat AlphaV, it became clear that the Russian cybersecurity and the hacker community operates very differently from the Western scene, exemplified in events like DEF CON. Rather than thriving in open collaborative forums, their ecosystem is tightly integrated with state-linked intelligence and military groups, resulting in significantly more closed and operationally siloed culture. From a cyber threat intelligence perspective, do you believe that proactive cultural outreach aimed at building bridges with these Russian security professionals and threat actors could facilitate improved intelligence sharing, help demystify their malware development and ransomware operations, targeting hospitals, critical infrastructure, and foster healthier cross-cultural relationships beneficial to global cybersecurity collaboration? What a question. So I think this is a fantastic question. And I went to eCrimes last week, which is basically a collaborative effort with a lot of the police and law enforcement in Canada. And it gives them a little forum and a little like a venue to discuss ideas and collaborate. So one of the biggest things that I was talking there and I was trying to explain to individuals is in Canada, we are very siloed as well. And we are very old school in how we handle the separation between government, private, and law enforcement in terms of information sharing. And in the Russian scene, you have a lot of these groups are very much they very much connect like in the Soviet and like ex-Soviet states like Russia, the government will reach down and reach out to like private citizens or companies or their intelligence services very much, and it's a very much like a fluid dynamic, right? And that exchange is very much done for the state. There's in Canada or in the United States, like that doesn't happen as fluidly. It happens, but not as fluidly. And it's not as embedded in the culture, right? There's a more of an individualism and of a capitalist mindset of like, my business is my business and I can say no, right? So when we're looking, but what I think what we should be doing is we should be, if we have information and we have intelligence that can help the greater good, we should be helping and not gatekeeping information that can help distribute data and like save companies, save lives. Like we shouldn't be gatekeeping. So it is a fantastic question. It's a very deep question, and I wish I could talk to it more. But if you come over on the voice channel, we can definitely dig through this more because this is a fantastic question, and I think there's a lot to say there. Here's another one from Savas. Are satellite communication security a thing of the past, present, or future? After the researchers from the University of California, San Diego, and the University of Maryland released their report a couple of days ago, I am conflicted. Even though it's an old tech with old protocols and insecure configurations, threat actors have not kept up with this. Do you believe there should be a better focus on it? I have not read that report, but I think a lot of the technology that
older satellites use, yes, is dated. But at the same time, it's like, what can you use, right? A lot of the like important satellites, like the military satellites, the intelligence satellites, the government satellites that are like taking images and like doing a lot of like intelligence gathering, like I believe those are secured. Again, I have not read that report, but a lot of the stuff that does like research purposes, like I believe like this is what you're referring to, is like the weather channel, like the weather satellites or the research-based equipment, like that could definitely be insecure. Like, what are you going to do with that, right? It's like, that's the thing. It's like, the biggest risk is if you have the ability to move it, and I guess like basically have it crash into something else, and then that creates a cascading effect, and basically we have a huge problem with space debris. But I think that would be an interesting thing. Send me that article. I would love to read that. So Elias Stannard says, great presentation, Tammy. Do you think we'll reach a point where privatized VC firms, angels, will exist for these GoFundMe-style ransomware syndicate startups? If yes, what will they look like outside of sanctioned government bodies, LOs? So yeah, I think this is going to be interesting. Like I didn't even explore the concept of like these like GoFundMes, but for ransomware operations, where, or even for cybercrime, like that is definitely something that could happen, where everybody that basically puts in crypto has is part of like a ledgers, the blockchain. So they have their split, they have a percentage of a stake in the operation, and basically from there the wallet can be split, and it's just like a smart contract, and whatever like revenue then it gets sent off to people, right? So like crowdsourcing and crowd investment is definitely something that can happen. I think that's a fantastic idea to explore. But yeah, it would be interesting to see. Again, a lot of these concepts, these thought experiments take a lot of effort to make, right? And these are not like, this is not like a quick scam that you can do for someone and get like a quick leg up on someone. Like this is like an enterprise level concept of effort. And I think we're still a ways out from that because of just the amount of effort that it takes to do all of this. But it's fun to talk about. It's great to talk about, and come join me in the voice chat. We will definitely be talking about some cool stuff. Awesome. So I'm going to stop it here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to the Discord voice chat, the general voice chat. And I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. And I will see you all there, and at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I shall see you all there. Thank you very much for joining me on this trip, and have a wonderful day. Bye.